Did I ever consider naming the film The Vampire? I did, but because I wanted it to be Nosferatu, it needed to remain Nosferatu.
The rats were there, the fire was there, it was on.
The rats that were nearest to the fire are not real, but we have thousands of real rats in order to for the rats to be believable. But obviously, no rats were harmed in the making of this.
No rats were harmed in the making of this film, but I felt there were a couple that came with me up onto the platform.
There is a devil in this world, and I have met him.
Yeah, so I worked with a movement coach for all of the kind of more physical scenes, which was amazingly helpful. Her name's Marie Gabrielle Roti. She's amazing. And she helped me a lot to choreograph all those scenes and also just, ground them in a real emotion so that it felt like all those moments were coming from a real place. Emotionally for the character, and that you could feel her kind of torment through all those moments, and that everything was grounded in like a real kind of humanity. But it was incredibly helpful for me to work with her, and Rob had a lot of amazing influences as well for those, like Buto, which is a Japanese dance discipline, as well as like 19th century hysteria studies. Very well researched, so I had a lot to pull from for that as well.
To be honest, you were my biggest sort of point of reference, because we'd been shooting already for a month or so before that point, and I'd seen Lily do so many of these physical scenes, so I kind of had a really good, I've been watching it so much that I was like, okay, this is great prep. But it is so physically demanding. I remember doing that scene in the bed when Anna's sort of, and it's so much actually about it's so much about the breath, which I think is really so much work done through breathing in this film, which is really, I think in the soundscape as well, breath is a huge part of it, and it's such a marker of your emotional state. And then when I am also possessed, the same, I felt like that was really helpful.
Were you wearing a corset in that scene?
I wasn't, thank God. I don't know how I would have done that.
Because the corset is crazy. It changes your breathing like so much.
Yeah, so much. Changes everything, like the way you hold yourself, the way you can walk through a room. Yeah. But I found it like challenging and a really great way to do those scenes. So, yeah, it was great.
Totally. Rob had spoken to me about this idea of like a demon face quite early on for that scene. And so I remember kind of like practicing in the mirror of like different, like how can I make my face look as scary as possible? And so that's kind of what we landed on. And when we shot that scene, it was very intense, because obviously it's all one shot. So it comes at the end of this like big emotional moment, and then like the whole thing. And then I like pulled his face, and I remember like Rob was like behind the camera going like push, because he wanted it to just like almost be like my face was like ripping apart. And so I was like just like trying to push my tongue out as far as it'll go to go.
It looks insane. It looks like it shouldn't be humanly possible.
Oh my God. I when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God, I really did that with my face.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, when I did ADR, I remember like, because there's a part where I'm like spitting.
Yeah.
And I said to Rob, I was like, oh, you added some like spit with the CGI, and he was like, no, that's yours. Yeah.
No.
And I was like, oh, cool.
Oh my God.
Its desire is to consume all life on Earth.
Physical stuff, I have some, but it's really about a relationship to the text and the relationship to the characters. So much of the preparation was just enjoying the research into the occult and who this guy might be and what he would surround himself with. I get a lot of clues from the set. I get a lot of clues from the research that he guides me towards. I get a lot of clues from the props. I mean, the world is so complete, it really tells you what to do. So you have to just be ready to enter that world, and then the world works on you. And then, of course, you have this beautiful text to drive you there.
Without getting too nerdy, Willem needed to know the kinds of occult knowledge that his character knew. So I was giving him some period texts about the vampire lore, and then at one point, Willem said, "I need some more prayers. Like there's more prayers that are needed in the movie." So then I had to go open up my books and find some some more sort of, because he is a Christian, but he is an occult Christian, so he's looking at things in a slightly different light. So we can't just be pulling from the King James Bible for this guy.
The text is so rich that you got to know where the stuff came from. And so in the research, not only do you try to think about the things that he's thinking about, but you know where they come from. So it's easy to imagine, not easy, but it's you can start to imagine the world that this man is in. Woman. That's interesting. He identifies somewhere with Ellen, I guess.
Standing before me was death.
It was very important for me to acknowledge Max Schreck in the design of the vampire. There's the things about the shape of the skull and the fingernails and the hunch that are Schreckian, but it was also incredibly important to not do Max Schreck again. And mainly because of my interest in folklore, and I said, what would a folk vampire be? What would, and that means a corpse, and not a handsome, suave, pale person in a dinner jacket, but a corpse. So what would a dead Transylvanian nobleman look like? What would their clothing be? What would their hairstyle be? And then it all comes from there. In the early folklore, most of the folklore, if vampires drink blood at all, they very often don't drink blood from the throat, which makes sense anatomically, but they would drink blood from your chest, which has kind of a poetic motif in the film because of the heart and love, but in reality, from old hag syndrome or sleep paralysis, you feel this pressure on your chest. So the victims who thought they were being haunted by vampires felt this and thought that that's where they were being harmed.
He's coming.
Who is coming to you, my child?
I always wanted my Nosferatu film to be Nosferatu because the way Murnau and his collaborators were able to distill Stoker's novel into a simple fairy tale is just preferable to me. And there's a lot more. I found that there was a lot more that I could do with it than, because I think if you're adapting a novel, I because of my way of working, I found I would feel like too slavish to the novel. And there's a lot of things about the novel, frankly, that I don't like. Like, while the story is one of the most important stories of the turn of the century and ushered in the 20th century, like Bram Stoker, while he wrote a great novel, is not the best writer of all time. So this gave me more freedom. And, and obviously I've been obsessed with this since I'm a kid, but it's not enough to be obsessed with something. You have to, and understanding that if it becomes Ellen's story, if it becomes Lily-Rose Depp, the central protagonist story, then I have a reason to do this. And once I found that, which was very early on, like 9 or 10 years ago, the script hasn't changed a lot. What's changed is that I've gotten better as a filmmaker. I'm closer to my collaborators that I've worked with over and over again, both actors and heads of department. And so I could do a better job articulating what was in my imagination.
I remember really loving the first read because Rob writes so cinematically. Instead of saying like the sun was rising, he'll say like the yellow orb rose like, slowly across the. It's like beautiful writing. So it's really, you can really see it immediately. And then I remember texting him after I read the scene with Anna and the rats, being like, "Hey, I just want to check, is this gonna be CGI or?"
He's like, "Of course not."
No, he's like, "Of course not. We've got the same animal trainer as who trained the fox in Antichrist. They'll be very well trained." I was like, "Okay." Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, same. I loved the first read. It was my first time reading a Robert Eggers script, and I was really excited because I've always loved his work. And you just see the movie come to life when you read it, because it's, like Emma said, it's written so cinematically and so just so thoroughly and so beautifully. One scene that I was definitely really anticipating was the, without giving anything away, the kind of like, there's a kind of big climactic scene between Nick and myself that is very, that's very emotional for me and also very physically demanding. And I read the script before I got the part. It was like before I auditioned, and so I remember thinking like, wow, I hope I can do this.
Is that the scene that you auditioned with?
Yeah. Yeah. I auditioned with that scene and also the, like, why did you kill these flowers, that scene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of get to see two sides of the character.
Those are so intense,
Yeah.
those scenes.
It was on Zoom. It was intense.
I can't imagine what that was like.
It was tough, but it worked. I got the part, so that was cool. Yeah.
I just like the writing. I like the character, that he was an outsider. He had a special function in the movie as well, because he's the if it's told from Ellen's point of view, he's the only one that really sees her. Everyone else kind of doesn't quite get her. So that's a special function in the movie, and I like that. It's very particular. And I just like the language. I like the fact that this guy is learned in things of the occult and alchemy. And while I'm not necessarily knowledgeable about those things, I have an interest in those things because, it's
More knowledgeable
all there.
than most.
It's all there, and we've got to know that to enjoy our lives.
I'm always looking forward to film any scene with Willem. Certainly, it's fun to write speeches with him in mind, and his. One of the things I like about the von Franz character a lot is that he is actually very interested in the contemporary science of 1838. It's not today's contemporary science, but it was contemporary then. But he also still loves and finds value in the old ways of thinking, stuff from the Middle Ages. And so while I don't think he completely dislikes Enlightenment, he has a speech railing against Enlightenment. That's pretty. I was looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's true.
He's a incredibly well-researched director, and so I think all of us got like a ton of knowledge to kind of dive into, whether that's like backstory or inspiration or movies to watch. I know one of them was like The Devil. I don't know if you watched that one. That was one of them for me. Cries and Whispers.
Yeah, Cries and Whispers.
Yeah, Cries and Whispers, amazing. And as well as like, you know, lots of like texts and also like inspirations for different things. Like that's what was cool also, is that he sent things that were like certain things that he liked for performance, certain things that he liked for just like general atmosphere. You know, I had specific inspirations for like my kind of like more physical scenes. He's incredibly detail oriented, and so everybody got kind of like tailor-made research for their character, which is really cool.
Really cool. Yeah, I got like a character bible, which sort of gave a lot of Anna's backstory. I mean, there was even one detail that was a particular movement from a particular like sonata that was playing when she first met her husband. It's like crazily detail oriented, but that really comes across in his work, I think.